Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Nick Infernus, and welcome back to another list video. Do you guys remember about a year ago at this point when I put out a very long video ranking every figure from the first year of Transformers Legacy? Well, I am back again to rank its sequel, Legacy Evolution, which I'd say was actually a decent amount better. I mean, sure, it started out with a bit of a whimper because Wave 4 is still the worst wave, but the rest of the waves, it's been a while since I've looked at the doc that has all the scores for the different waves, but I think I have all three of the rest of them above each wave of the first year. Like, don't get me wrong, waves 1 and 3 were good, and wave 2 is decent, but waves 5 through 7 have been excellent. So, rules here are pretty much the same. No store exclusives unless it's a unique mold, and that also goes for repacks. If they're, you know, if they are part of the main line, then of course they're going to be included here, though repacks will have their own little section in the honorable mentions, which, yes, I am doing this time. And yeah, that's a few exceptions. So, starting with the honorable mentions is a figure that I really should have mentioned in last year's list and didn't for some reason. Well, I know why I didn't, is because I didn't back it. HasLab Victory Saber. Which, yeah, I didn't get this because I have no interest in any version of this character whatsoever, and it's also really expensive. But it should have at least gotten a mention. From what I've heard, it's an excellent mold with some really bad QC, so thankfully they handled Deathsaurus a lot better. Another honorable mention is the Titan class Nemesis, which I would have loved to get, but I didn't because I don't have enough space in my room for another Titan. Then the final normal honorable mention before we get to the repacks is the PulseCon exclusive Powerlinks Hotshot and Jolt, who I'm only including because of Jolt. And no, I'm not going to put Shattered Glass Rodimus and Sideswipe on here. I had to do a double take because that Sideswipe is very clearly a pre-paint of Armada Wheeljack. But not just because they come with Whisper, who's another minicon, doesn't mean that they're going to be included on here. I will include Jolt, however, because, he is a part of the Legacy line, whereas they are not. And he is a fun little minifigure. He has a fun transformation. He poses pretty decently despite having no articulation at the head. And he's very satisfying to mess with in his helicopter mode because his rotor blades spin really well. But he doesn't really stack up against the other figures from this line, not even the core class figures. So I couldn't really include him, plus this Hotshot mold is going to be on the list anyways. So yeah, I'd still recommend it. It's a bit of a hefty price, but considering that not a lot of people, that's an online exclusive, I can understand why they'd increase the price just so they can make the normal amount back. It's an exclusivity thing with how a lot of stuff works. That toy guy does a really good job explaining stuff like this, so definitely go check him out. So the other part of the honorable mentions is the repacks. Core class Optimus Prime, which, fun fact, that Optimus and Bumblebee core class thing was on here because of the trailer, but I took it off. Leader class Blitzwing, core class Bombburst, leader class Dragon Megatron, and deluxe class Tarantulas. All great figures in their own right, but they came out last year, so I can't include them. It's a shame because, like I said, they're all great. In fact, Tarantulas would absolutely be in the top 5, but again, not figures from Legacy Evolution originally. So now it's time to get into the actual list. At number 39, Core Class Sludge. The one figure where people can ask me what's wrong with it, and I can point at it and just say, look. This right here is what happens when you have a combiner team and you focus primarily on the combine mode, which is weird because the other Dinobots, as compromised as most of them are, don't have this problem. I can still tell that the modes were prioritized, but they weren't here for some reason. For some reason, they just decided, yeah, let's just focus on the hips mode. The mode that's the hips for the combined Volcanicus. So the result is a really janky robot mode, a messy front half and dumpy back half combined into a Brontosaurus mode, the worst posing out of any of the Dinobots, and probably the worst transformation as well. It can be fun in a breezy sort of way, but it can also be very clashy with the way the hands peg into the tail. So this isn't my least favorite figure in my collection. This probably isn't even the worst figure in my collection. But overall, we're just left with a figure that's, where nothing from the first year of Legacy is doing worse than this, and there's no way in hell that anything from Legacy United will do worse than this. Number 38, Deluxe Class Strongarm, which should be expected because I've gone on record to say that I'm not a huge fan of the Elita 1 mold. It was probably one of the fiddliest figures from Legacy's first year, and this is just a worse retool of that with more kibble, especially coming off the elbows. These spikes are so annoying, and even the wings sometimes don't want to cooperate. These shoulder bits can get annoying sometimes. I will give it this over Sledge, though. It does at least look like a very good approximation of the character. At least it's not a flustercluck like the other thing is. If I accidentally said the swear word previously, I am so sorry. I try my best not to say that stuff. Say like those kinds of words. But yes, at the very least, this does look like a cohesive version of Strongarm, and I can kind of see why they would pick Elita 1's mold. But the problem here is that this has all of Elita's problems. It doesn't exactly pose the greatest, it's always in its own way, and the transformation just isn't fun. So while it does look better than Sludge, I'd probably say that it's a worse play experience than Sludge, despite the fact that this probably poses better. Number 37, Deluxe Class Breakdown, which is just unfortunate. Now, yes, I'm not really a huge fan of the Wild Rider mold either, but what puts this guy below Wild Rider for me actually isn't the parts forming spoiler. I do still wish that that could have been two parts that maybe clipped together. Like maybe they had tabs that connect together when you connect the legs together for the car mode. But the car mode is actually what puts him below Wild Rider for me, because this is still just a Ferrari. Actually, no, it's the front half of a Ferrari and the back half of a Lamborghini Countach. Why couldn't they have just retooled the front into a Countach? I don't really think there was anything stopping them. Otherwise, I would, if it weren't for that, this would probably be the better version of the mold, even with the parts forming spoiler, because this does have better tolerances than the Wild Rider did. Number 36, Deluxe Class Axle Grease. So I guess I probably should explain now how I'm going to do, retools and repaints like this that are right next to their original molds on the list, which, yes, I guess does spoil that number 35 is Scraphook. But yeah, Axle Grease at number 36. What puts her below Scraphook? Here's what I'm going to do. If the repaint is first, then I'll say what they did worse than the original mold. If the original mold is first, I'll talk about them and then say what the repaint did better. There are two examples of this coming up, so this will make sense when we get to that. But what Axle Grease does worse than Scraphook is actually the car mode. While I do think it's impressive that they were able to turn a tow truck into a muscle car, it does leave this hideous blue block just sticking out of it, and I can't help but feel like they could have at least retooled that to be more uniform with the rest of the car, or at the very least paint it with the same gunmetal that we see on the rest of it. Plus, there's the fact that this shows up nowhere in robot mode. Well, I guess it's that little blue block right there, but still, would anyone really have been that upset if there was just a little bit of an empty gap there? There's an empty gap on the upcoming Studio Series Pablo, and very few people that I've seen are complaining about it. At least, I wasn't complaining about it. But yeah, this is still just as flawed as the Scraphook, which, speaking of, at number 35, the Scraphook, this is just another really frustrating figure, in my opinion. I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, but the elbows absolutely are, with how they constantly pop off. Fun fact, I actually bought the Buzzworthy Bumblebee toe line, and then I returned it because it had the elbows problem. What's the elbows problem? They pop off with very little force, and therefore they make the transformation hell. And they make posing him hell because they're also super loose joints that pop off. Not helping is that the bicep swivels are also very tight. There's also no help in the fact that the shoulders are really in the way. The modes look good, at the very least, but the play experience is so bad that it's kind of hard to not put him anywhere but here. Number 34, Voyager Class Dirge. This one's a little bit hard for me to describe because while it's hard for me to think of bad things to say about it, it's also not something where I feel comfortable putting it higher. Really, my issues with this thing stem down to the pretty lackluster posing where the knees constantly want to untab, and this has the problem with the of Alita 1 where it's in its own way for the most part, like how there's just a butt plate here that completely prevents the legs from going back, the untabbing knees, like I mentioned. And also, the transformation is still not the most fun thing. It can be decent, but the doors on the forearms are a big pain to open, as is detaching the collar from the torso. Like I generally don't like any transformation where you're forced to flex plastic, and this isn't really the best feeling plastic, probably because it's just a flat, repack of the Earthrise Dirge with none of the plastics changed. And again, the molds look fine, though I'd say they'd probably look worse than Scraphook here because of all this going on, because of just all the kibble and the mono skirt and just the giant wings. Why couldn't these just be the same piece as the small wings up here? Why does this guy have to have giant wings jutting off his shins? I say I don't have a lot of bad things to say about this, and then I find a bunch of bad things to say about this. And then the jet mode would actually be great if it wasn't for the fact that you can't close the shin doors all the way. Yep, they're just there, untabbed, resting on the monoskirt, which is a lot harder to describe. You can kind of see it here. You can kind of see just how that juts out from the bottom a little bit. Now, I don't hate the Earthrise Starscream mold, but it's definitely not great. The Siege one's definitely better, though I don't really see how they could have gotten cone heads out of that. Though honestly, I don't know why they here's what they should have done. They should have just repacked Siege Skywarp. Problem solved. Instead, they repacked this thing that people only wanted because it was a hard to find figure of a character that people like. Number 33, I believe we're on. Core Class Grimlock. Now, during my Wave 5 video, I said that this guy does everything better than Sludge, but not as good as Slag. I guess now I can revise that to he does everything better than Sludge, but not nearly as good as everybody else. He looks better than Sludge in both modes, but the other Dinobots are better at that. He poses better than Sludge, but the other Dinobots are better than that. He has a better transformation than Sludge, since it's just the standard Grimlock transformation. But while one other Dinobot might be tied with him in this case, I can't say that the other Dinobots are really doing this worse. Again, it is the standard Grimlock transformation, but at the very least, the other ones had something going on. Where Slag had traditional Slag transformation that managed to not faux form despite the 86 figure doing that, and then Swoop and Snarl actually being pretty fun with their conversions. Whereas this is breezy but not clashy, but also just a little bit, I guess, it could be a little bit boring. Especially because it's just a simplified masterpiece, which the 86 figure already was. Overall, it's okay for what it is. It is better than Sludge, but the other Dinobots are definitely doing better. Number 32, Core Class Scar. Now, this is actually a good figure in my opinion, but there are some things holding it back. For one, the way I describe this thing's posing is that it has the lower body of Slag, who we'll get to, but the upper body of Sludge. So the legs have a lot of range, but the arms are very restricted. Not to mention the way that this thing's legs are built looks like he's constantly leaning back, and it constantly... I need to stop using words so much in the same sentence. And it makes me feel like he's just going to fall over any instance, which that's kind of how it felt like when I first got him out of the package. But then I popped his shins off and popped them back on, and now they don't spring back like they used to. The transformation is decently fun, but it can be a little annoying to put the legs over the arms. And the Ankylosaurus mode is actually pretty nice. The only problem I really have with it is just the combiner port just being there instead of maybe recessed further up. And yeah, the robot mode looks pretty nice as well. Here is what's pictured here is the standard configuration with the combiner hinge just completely folded up, but you can actually just hinge it down a little bit to give more clearance to the head, and that does result in a more clean physique. For the one original Dinobot in Legacy, this is doing a pretty good job. It has some issues, but it could definitely be worse. Number 31, Deluxe Class Needle Nose. And this is a very conflicting figure for me because the robot mode and posability are actually excellent. With the exception of the nose cone hanging off the bottom, everything about this is pretty much perfect. And his little target masters are pretty nice as well. I'd say they're pretty much side grades of the Peacemaker that came with Point Blank. Like, yeah, they look better in both modes, but their transformations, and I guess to an extent their posability, if you want to call it that, are pretty lackluster. Peacemaker at least had somewhat of an ab crunch. These guys are just immobile bricks with fold out nozzle, with just like fold out gun barrels. But like I said, his posability is also excellent with maximum elbows and really deep knees and a waist that's really hard to actuate. But then you get the transformation, and this is probably the most boring figure on the list up to this point. Like he's up there with Sludge with how boring this gets. Simply put, just curl him up into a ball and unfold the backpack. That is it. And you're left with a jet mode that's not very pleasing to look at. If you remove the robot, if you remove the robot, it probably looks fine, even if the jet mode would look a little flat then. But as it is, it's basically just a giant block of stuff with a nose cone sticking out of it. This is still a good figure, but it's got some pretty big issues. It's overall a mixed bag, but still one worth recommending in my opinion. Number 30, Voyager class Leo Prime. Now, again, this is another conflicting one because the modes look really good and the posability is pretty good too. In fact, I'd say that the two modes look actually excellent if it weren't for the lion face. What puts this one this low is that the transformation is not fun at all, especially with the lion head and even unpegging all of, like the shoulder and the backpacks from going from lion to robot. Neither transformation is all that fun, and especially with how you have to rotate things around each other and squeeze parts together. And for some reason, the arms never want to stay attached to the lion head. I've got no idea why that is, but for what it is, even if it is the weakest Voyager in Legacy, currently at least, it is still a very good figure and one that I'm happy to own. And where are we? We're at number 30, was it? Yes, 30. Moving on to number 29 is the repaint Nemesis Leo, or Nemesis Leo Prime. And really what puts this one up above Leo Prime is that this one has an actual gun, even if it has nowhere to go in lion mode. And the lion mode has actually has painted eyes, unlike whatever's going on here. So at the very least, this thing is expressive. Solid repaint, you don't need it, but if you don't have Leo Prime, then I'd recommend it. Number 28, Leader Class Prime Skyquake. This is a very similar situation to Leo Prime, where it has two really good looking modes, really good posability. In fact, that's probably what's putting it up above Leo Prime, but another very unpleasant transformation. Just the way you have to scrape parts past each other, and I was literally transforming this guy the other day, and one of his fins popped off multiple times. That's never happened to me before. So it's not really a fun process to do, but at the very least, it is a good posing figure, even if the joints really don't like... The joints are really unpleasant to listen to as well, and unpleasant to move. It's just kind of an unpleasant experience, but the look of the two modes more than makes up for it. Just like his repaint at number 27, not Skyquake, this is Dreadwing. And this one, I'd say, just has more pleasant to move joints. Like, they don't squeak or feel like they're going to break. They just feel like your standard, ratchet joints. They feel like the joints that 86 Grimlock and Snarl have, where, they're pretty soft, but at the same time, they don't feel like they're going to break. Otherwise, it's just copy and paste from Skyquake. Excellent looking robot mode and excellent looking jet mode, which I forgot to mention. I love how it combines the Prime and G1 aesthetics into one figure. And the posing is still great here. But yeah, the transformation is still not that great. Though for what they are, again, these are probably the weakest leader class figures that we've gotten in Legacy. And for what they are still really good. Number 26, Deluxe Class Hotshot. And man, I feel like I'm just being a broken record at this point because this guy has the exact same pros and cons as the last four figures. Robot mode? Well, I mean, except for the shins, really good. Alt mode, fantastic. Posing, also really good, with knees that you can actually cheat for really deep. And while I'd say this thing doesn't really have a great transformation, it is better. The only problems I really have is just pegging the windshield together and unpegging it. That's a bit of a pain in the ass, but otherwise, it's still a fun figure to the point where I even decided to get the Power Links version. And again, weakest Armada figure, still really good. Number 25, Deluxe Class Shadow Striker. The very obvious Sideburn retool that's doesn't look like a Dodge Viper in alt mode. This is a figure that does everything pretty much good. Like, it has a good looking robot mode for what it is, it has good posing, it has a really good transformation, and a really good alt mode. There's not really much to go off here. It is just a really good, solid figure, but there are certainly better. Still not bad for what you're paying, though. Number 24, Core Class Nemesis Prime. This is just the great Optimus Prime core class, but in the Nemesis colors, and with an axe accessory that actually pegs into the arm really well, unlike the fusion cannon. I don't know why this was so hard to do on the regular core class Optimus, but nice of them to include this and to include it on the more tune accurate colors version that was in the 2-pack with Bumblebee. Number 23, Deluxe Class Crash Bar. That was really hard to say for some reason. Deluxe Class Crash Bar. This one has a few frustrations in the transformation, like the legs falling off, but otherwise this is a very nice design for the Junkions and for a Junkion and a big improvement over Scraphook. For one, this thing doesn't have joints that just want to fall off because why not? Like, that's another problem that Scraphook had. The elbows weren't even supposed to come off, and yet they did all the time. Here, the only joints that come off are the ones that are supposed to come off. And yeah, it can be a little frustrating, but at least it's not the worst thing ever. And for what it is, the transformation is still fairly decent. It has great posing, and the bike mode, while being a bit big, is also really nice. This is a great Junkion, but there are better ones to come later. Number 22, Deluxe Class Shrapnel. This one's a bit conflicting. It looks great in both modes. I mean, the bug mode's a bit weird, but it's somewhat accurate. But this one just doesn't really spark anything for me. For what this is, it's a great figure. It has a very simple transformation and great posing for what it is if you can get the head to move. But I don't know. It doesn't spark joy. It's not horrible by any means, and I didn't really feel comfortable putting this lower than it currently is. But hey, maybe this does something more for you, which is why I put it this high. It could just be how I see it, just me seeing it as just a boring figure, but I can tell that it is at least a great piece. And we're at number 21 now. Deluxe Class DevCon. This one's kind of like the Shrapnel in a way, though I do think that the colors are helping this one a lot more. This is a very impressive retool of Blur, to the point where I wasn't even expecting it to be that at first. I kind of thought they were going to go with a new mold. This thing actually looked pretty weird in the initial pictures, but getting it in hand, it is much better than I originally gave it credit for. I mean, yeah, the proportions are still a little bit wonky, and his thighs are a bit too skinny for my taste. But as the Autobot bounty hunter that we only ever see in one episode of G1, this is a great representation of that, even with the giant backpack. In fact, I'd say the alt mode is basically perfect. The transformation is very simple but very fun, and I'd say more fun than Shrapnel. And the posability is decent enough. It's basically what you'd expect from the Blur mold, but still, for what it is, it's a great figure. Number 20, Core Class Slag. And no, I will not be calling him Slug. That sounds dumb. And this was kind of the first figure from Legacy Evolution that surprised me. I wasn't expecting to like this thing as much as I do, but I do. Sure, this still has the problem of not having elbows, which I didn't mention before because I thought it was pretty obvious. But I'm bringing it up here because it's really one of my only issues with this thing. Despite that, it still poses really good. It looks pretty decent for one of these core class Dinobots. It has a fun transformation and a very nice Triceratops mode. If it weren't for those elbows, this probably would be higher, though higher than our number 19 is debatable. Snarl, who is a very fun little core class Stegosaurus who gets put up over the other guy because he has better posing. Actually having elbows. Sure, his knees don't bend deeper, but his elbows sure do. And still a fun transformation here that leads to a very nice little Stegosaurus mode, even with the fist hanging out the back. So in general, these two I'd say it's at these two where the core class Dinobots start to get great. And I think even the designers admitted that Snarl and another one to come later is where they really found their footing. Number 18, Deluxe Class Crosscut. Man, why did you have to have red wheels? I mean, making the wheels black probably wouldn't have changed where this placed on this list, but it would place them above Skids, and as of right now, it is below Skids, because at least Skids had wheels that matched the aesthetic. Here, are you sure you didn't have any black plastic in your budget? Or any more black paint? Like, I don't think any of us really would have cared if this thing was completely silver. It's nice to look at for what it is, and this probably has the best quality of any of the Skids retools, with the worst probably going to Crankcase on that front, followed by Burnout. But if you didn't pick up Skids, this is a great repaint of that figure. Number 17, Commander Class Armada Optimus Prime, a figure that a lot of people are placing really high on their lists, which I get it, but I do find that the transformations are frustrating enough to where I don't feel comfortable putting it any higher. Though this is still a great piece of art, or a great piece of work. The modes all look fantastic, and they pose excellently. Though I guess that's a bit of a lie about the combined mode. The combined mode doesn't really pose the best. The core robot certainly does, and the truck mode looks great. Hell, this even has a base mode that isn't bullshit. But again, the transformations aren't really the best. There's way too much going on with the trailer for my taste. I guess pegging the core robot into the combined mode isn't really the smoothest, and it's an even bigger pain to get it back out. And the transformation from core robot to truck mode isn't fun either. It's not terrible, but it's also, it's kind of boring. So overall, while I don't like any of these transformations, I'll still do them because it is worth it getting to the different modes. Number 16. Yes, 16. Deluxe Class Origins Jazz, who doesn't exactly pose the best or have the best transformation, but he's up here because of just how good it feels to handle this guy. All the joints are tight and smooth, but not too tight to where it feels like they're going to break. The plastic actually reminds me of Override, which, if you know me, you know that's very high praise because Override is a very good figure. Like, really, all this, I wouldn't be surprised if they used the same plastic for her that they did on this guy, because this is some sturdy feeling stuff. And even the clear plastic feels very, very strong. I don't know where all the reports of this thing breaking came from, but I still haven't seen any, which reflects my experience with this figure. Again, doesn't exactly pose the best because the knees are, and the transformation is mostly good, with the exception of pegging the windshield into the legs. But this is a very solid Jazz figure that actually replaced the 86 figure in my collection. So, yeah. Number 15, Deluxe Class Bombshell. This is a retool of the Shrapnel from earlier, and I'd say this does everything a good amount better. For one, it actually has some visual flair thanks to the purple chest. I know some people don't like the hat helmet thing, which I can kind of understand, but it doesn't bother me that much. It poses a little bit better thanks to having some backwards butterfly. It has a better looking alt mode, which honestly, I just think it looks really cute. It kind of reminds me of that multi-legged pig thing from Monsters University. I don't remember what that thing is called, but it reminds me of that. And the transformation is even decently fun thanks to the integration of those butterfly joints. So overall, this is a much more enjoyable version of the Shrapnel mold. Number 14, Voyager Class Metal Hawk. Man, if you had told me that this thing wouldn't be topping any of my lists when this first got revealed, I probably would have called you a liar. Or maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. because this is a retool of one of my favorite figures of all time, that being Kingdom Cyclonus. And to be fair, this wears the mold extremely well. The knees are a bit weak on my copy, and in fact, a lot of the joints are much weaker in this case. But it's still a very good posing figure for what it is, and the transformation is still fun. The jet mode does look a bit weird to me, though. If it didn't have the arms here, it would probably look perfect. And it's not a bad looking plane, but the images definitely make it look better than it is in real life. Well, this image certainly doesn't, because that is a stubby nose cone. That is some super unfortunate foreshortening. But for a retool of one of the best figures to come out during the 2020s, this is still a very solid effort. Number 13, Core Class Thundercracker. Now, I will be talking about the Starscream very shortly. I should have gotten new pictures for this. Why didn't I? But I will say what's putting this below that Starscream is just the shoulders. The shoulders are a little bit looser on this copy, at least on my copy of Thundercracker, when compared to Starscream. But this is still an excellent low core class Thundercracker, and a very good repaint of the excellent core class Starscream from Kingdom, which before Soundwave came out was actually my favorite core class. I will say this thing doesn't really pose the best, but it does have a really fun transformation, which, while being complex or core class, is still very fun to do. It's just a very interesting and intuitive secret transformation that does things that you wouldn't expect. And both modes look great for the size and price point that they're going for. Really, I don't think you could ask for a better set of core class Seekers. Now, if they could just give Skywarp his null rays at some point, that would be really nice. Did I mention that Starscream is number 12 because he's number 12? Number 11 is Core Class Sound Blaster, who is a repaint of Core Class Soundwave that just works better because it's easier to peg the shoulder launcher in. And yeah, it's just easier to peg the shoulder launcher in because I don't have to bend the backwards butterfly back just to slot it in. Here, it just goes in. And otherwise, the tolerances on this thing are pretty much the same as Sound Blaster. So they're the same as Soundwave. So if anything, this thing is just a very slight minuscule upgrade over that already excellent figure. Number 10, Deluxe Class Detritus. Still a very big surprise for me because I was not expecting to love this guy at all. I expected to like him, didn't expect to love him though. Really, the only thing that's keeping it lower is just that the other figures did better, but we still have a very good looking figure that sometimes gets in its own way a little bit with the size of the shins, that poses well, has a fun transformation that's also a little bit stiff back here, and a Jeep mode that looks really good. Number 9, Core Class Swoop. And even after getting every Core Class figure that's been released up to this point, from Legacy at least, and from Studio Series, this is still probably my favorite. And this is definitely the best of the Core Class Dinobots. It looks the best in robot mode, it poses the best out of all of them, has a fun transformation, and a decent enough pterodactyl mode. That's probably the thing keeping it from placing higher, is just those legs. Just those legs just being up there. I understand that the Core Class budget, it would have been a little bit hard to have them collect. I don't think it would have been impossible, but it probably would have compromised the look of the robot mode a little bit. Actually, looking at it, that probably wouldn't have been too hard. I imagine that's what the 86 liter figure is going to do, but this is still a fantastic pocket swoop. Number 8, Voyager Class Twin Cast. That's another one like Crash Bar that was really hard to say. And like with the Starscream and Sound Blaster and Thundercracker, this is just a repaint of the excellent Blaster, just with worse QC and a discolored hip joint, which you can't see here, but it has been complained about. Really, if the tolerances were a little bit better, like, if anything, just tighten up the hips a little bit, and you've got already an excellent figure, and maybe make the knees less rough. This is the one advantage in tolerances that this has over the Kingdom Blaster, is that the knees don't feel unpleasant to move. Like, they don't feel rough, at least. They are very smooth, despite being much looser, and really every joint on this thing is much looser, except for the outwards on the hips. But otherwise, this is still a very excellent figure. It looks great in both modes. It has a fun transformation that's a little frustrating, but still intuitive and interesting. And the posability is pretty decent. And he also comes with Rewind, who is a very nice repaint of the Eject. And this is number 8. Yes, 8. Number 7, Deluxe Class Animated Prowl. And honestly, I feel like for these top 10, I'm just going to be a broken record because I'll be saying a lot of the same things for a lot of these. These are just some excellent figures overall. As a reinterpretation of Prowl from Animated, this looks pretty awesome. It gets the proportions down while still fitting it in with the general Generations aesthetic. I'm literally looking at this now, and that's unfortunate, but still accurate to how it looks, kind of. The bike mode's a bit. It's, I guess, it's a little bit thick in some ways, but it's still a nice looking bike mode. The transformation is a little fiddly, but it's still a satisfying process to get done, and it's an excellent posing figure with some of the best feet from any of these figures. Please do not clip that out of context. But yeah, for the first Legacy animated figure that they did, this was a great start. Number 6, Voyager class Trashmaster. While recording this whole video, I was concerned that I was getting the numbering wrong. Those concerns have gone away. I don't know why I didn't just decide to put the numbers up here, probably because I figured that would have been more work. In hindsight, I was preparing this video for so long that it probably would have been a benefit. But anyways, Trashmaster, easily the best of the Legacy Evolution Junkions, even if you include Detritus. And simply put, this is just the best at everything. It has probably my favorite robot mode design. It has the best alt mode with this very solid, chunky brick of a garbage truck. It has the best posing, and I'd say it probably has the most fun transformation. I mean, there are some things that do bug me a little bit, like this butt flap gets in the way quite a bit, as do the side flaps, and it's a major pain to unpeg the front grille from the rest of the garbage truck. But otherwise, this is the Junkion that's probably just the best at each individual thing. Best looking robot mode and vehicle mode, best posing with deep elbows and very mobile feet, and the best most fun transformation that actually took me by surprise when I first did it. Number 5, we're getting to the big leagues with a big figure to start off. Leader Class Armada Megatron. I'll get my big issue with this guy out of the way first. These shoulders are a pain to deal with. First of all, they don't lock into the torso at all, so they're kind of just freewheeling on the transformation joint, which left a lot of people concerned with how this was going to combine with Tidal Wave, but then our fears were quelled when we saw images of that Tidal Wave. I'm getting off track. But this is easily, for me, the best of the Legacy Armada figures. The most accurate in robot mode, an excellent tank mode, probably my favorite tank mode out of any of the tank formers that I own, which I think the figure doing the best in that category was Kingdom Warpath, but even then he had that really annoying parts forming piece. Here, there is no parts forming whatsoever. It's not the best poser, it's still really good, but it's a very minor drawback compared to this transformation. This is definitely the best tank transformation I've experienced. It's just a fun, pleasant, and quick experience that leaves you with, again, fantastic tank mode. Plus, the plastic feels excellent as well, which is probably something you could say for all of these. All of them have very good plastic, but this one has some of the best. So yeah, easily the best Armada figure, I'd say. And I definitely look forward to that inevitable Galvatron repaint that was leaked for the United line. Number 4, Deluxe Class Beachcomber, the best deluxe to come out this year. And let me tell you, from the moment this guy got revealed, I was hyping myself up so much for this guy. And the hype paid off. I was even worried that he wouldn't be able to top the list for, the Wave 6 video I did because Tarantulas was repacked in the same wave. But that was also proven to be, well, it was a quelled fear, because I do find that I like this guy just a little bit more than Tarantulas. This probably poses about the same if you switched out the elbows and knees. It has a transformation that I'd say is probably a little bit more fun. Tarantulas' transformation could get a little bit, clunky in some parts, but here it's just a very It's, again, not the smoothest transformation, but it's still a good one. And this is one of those figures that radiates its quality through touch. Again, very, very high quality plastic on here, and some fun accessories. You get a gun that turns into that can act as a grill for the dune buggy mode that actually doesn't look that bad, and you get a bird. What's not to love about bird? Except for the fact that bird is not pictured here. And also in both modes, this thing just looks excellent. The toes in the buggy mode are a bit off-putting, but it's mildly ignorable when compared to just how damn good this thing looks in robot mode. Like, damn, that is a very clean robot mode, and there's barely any hollowness on him. For a deluxe class, it's a very well done figure. And despite being a mini bot and not coming with that much, he, in my opinion, he absolutely justifies the price point and earns the best deluxe of Legacy for this year. Number 3, Voyager class Bludgeon. This probably gives away what the upper 2 spots are, but this is a case where they're not directly next to each other. Don't worry, I will talk about that. So starting off with Bludgeon, for a repaint of Tarn, this fits the character of Bludgeon incredibly well. Of course, this comes with a new accessory in the form of his sword, and this is a place where the Hot Rod shoulders actually come in handy. He can actually get into a lot of really good sword swinging poses, despite not having the wrist for it. Like, he can actually get the sword over his head in a very natural way. And besides that, he has all of Tarn's already excellent posing. The transformation is still very good, and the tank mode is nice. I can definitely see why they picked Tarn's mold for this guy, since it does have some similarities to the current design of Bludgeon in the IDW comics. Number 2, our runner-up, HasLab Deathsaurus. I have been dying to talk about this thing since he came in. First of all, it's just big. Like, this is a huge figure that's actually as big as Siege Jetfire and Legacy Menasor, but this probably has the best plastic on the list, which, I mean, it better be for something that you're paying $200 for. But man, every single thing on this, I like to squeeze my figures. I know that's probably a weird thing, but it's just when a figure feels so good, I can't help but it's just a very high quality feeling product. And it also has a lot of really high quality ratchet joints. It's just high quality in general. They brought back chrome. I don't know where the stuff to chrome figures went. They said they got rid of the technology, but it's here. It does also pose pretty good for what it is. You can, bend the knees much further than it might seem originally. Originally just looks like it's 90 degrees, but you can get much more than that. And there are a lot of really dynamic poses you can get this guy into, like the bow pose. Fun fact, I almost never use this. Speaking of stuff I don't really use that much, he does come with a lot of stuff. It's not stuff that I use, but I can definitely see the use for it. The transformation is very fun, probably one of the only figures of this size that I will actively decide to flip back and forth between modes, with the other being Jetfire. And did I mention that both modes here look fantastic? The toes are a bit mistransformed here because they can actually sit more flush to the body by just flipping out the hip skirts. But yeah, for something that costs $200, this is really trying to earn your dollar, and it shows, with high quality plastic and just the best experience that you could get from a crowdfunding project. But it couldn't quite get number 1, and if you saw number 3, then you probably know why, because number 1 is Tarn. From the moment this thing got revealed, the only question in my head is, okay, that looks great, but is it better than G-Axis? And if you know me, you know that G-Axis is my favorite figure from Legacy in its first year. But this manages to outdo G-Axis with one single solitary trait. Now, as far as robot mode are concerned, these two are pretty much dead tied. Tarn has some weird proportions, like being a lot more, I guess, skinny than Tarn is. He's usually a much more, I guess, more built character. But I don't mind the slim proportions all that much, and there's still a little bit of heft to him. The posability is probably I'd say goes to Tarn here. He has less deep elbows, but much deeper knees and hot rod shoulder, and despite both of them having hot rod shoulders, his actually go up all the way, unlike G-Axis, where you kind of have to cheat his. The transformation is probably going in GX's favor here for being more fun, but Tarn still has a great one. And the alt mode is where this thing takes the edge up over GX's, being almost the spitting image of the tank mode that he had in the IDW comics. I mean, yeah, there's the knee pads and fists sticking out of the back, but I mean, there are worse figures that have that issue that actually do it better, so what can I say? So yeah, overall, this thing is just an excellent piece, something that I was so excited to finally get my hands on. And let me just say, when the first thing that I'm doing with you when I get the first thing if the first thing that I'm doing with a figure when I get it out of its packaging is comparing it to the best figure from the previous chapter in the line, then you know you did a good thing. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my very long list video for Transformers Legacy Evolution. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. See you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.